The Vice President of Events with Government Executive Media Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Nextgov's third annual Digital Citizen Summit. This summit brings together government leaders who are transforming the way their services are designed and delivered, and we also have some industry experts here today who will share best practices in digital services from the private sector. For those of you who are not familiar with Nextgov, hopefully you all are since you got our emails and our advertisements, we are the technology and innovation publication of Government Executive Media Group, and we're the most trusted information resource serving senior decision makers in government. Our journalists are dedicated to leading the national discussion about how technology and innovation are transforming the way government agencies serve citizens and perform vital functions. Central to the mission is exploring emerging technologies and their potential impact on government, which is exactly what we're hoping to talk about today. I would like to thank you all for joining us, and we're excited to hear from leaders in technology and government and explore what it means to truly be a digital government, from design and user experience to accessibility and engagement. Throughout the event, we really encourage you to continue the conversation by tweeting on social media or on Facebook. Our hashtag today is hashtag Digital Citizen Summit 19. It's a little long, but hopefully you can include that in your tweet. Today's event would not be possible without the generous support of our underwriters today, so I would really love to thank Adobe and Amazon Web Services for being here with us. They'll also be doing some presentations later, so they should be really involved in the program, and we're excited to hear from their perspective. It's now my honor to introduce our first panel on UX principles that work in government. I'd now like to welcome our panelists, Danielle Brigida, Acting Deputy Director of Digital Service with the U.S. Department of Interior, Julia Lind-Paintner, UX Designer with 18F, Jen Nonya, Designer with U.S. Digital Service, where she is at Department of Homeland Security, and our moderator is Aaron Boyd, Senior Editor at Nextgov. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. Hopefully it's a good experience for all you customers out there. So as we get kicked off here today, we've got a great agenda. We're going to be covering a lot of different topics within the customer experience realm. And to kick us off here, we've got a few critical customer experience experts who can help us kind of break down where this discipline is at today and how it's being used across government. So to start off, let's just go right down the line. Just introduce yourselves, who you are, why you're here, what you do. Julie?
Hi, my name is Julia Lind-Paintner. I work at 18F. I'm on the UX design team there. I've been there about a year. Before that, I was working in the private sector with a small innovation consulting firm that did a lot of work with government clients, and before that, did a fellowship at the Census Bureau. So all throughout, have been working in a user experience capacity. I'm here today to talk about the ways in which, at 18F, I've been involved in bringing user experience to groups within our partner agencies, as well as some of the efforts that we've been involved with to create broader UX tools, such as the US web design system, that can assist other agencies across government in promoting UX.
Hi, my name is Jen Noina. I am also a UX designer, and I also do UX strategy, currently with the United States Digital Service. I'm currently working with the Department of Energy. Some past projects I've been on include being the UX design lead at an engagement at FEMA. I've led discovery sprints at the Department of Energy, and currently I am looking at hiring designers into USDS and improving that experience. I'm here today really just to talk about,
Just go.
because I'm really passionate about user experience as well in government, making sure that we have government services that work for our citizens, and injecting the user needs into our practices to make sure that we are being user-centered.
Nice job powering through there.
Hi, I'm Danielle Brigida, and I work for the U.S. Department of the Interior right now as Acting Deputy Digital Director. There is no digital director, but there are two of us who are doing this job. And my focus usually is social media. So when I was initially asked to do UX, it's an exciting time for us because it is part of what I'm doing with social media and the web. And it's a nice way to actually frame it. And that's totally what we're trying to do at the Department of the Interior is really provide not only a service but an experience for people. And so a lot of my job comes down to like thinking about what we're providing online and in these spaces that really translates to an experience.
Excellent. So let's start there. How are you using social media? Is it about curating a good experience for citizens interacting with Interior on social media, or are you gleaning insights from social media to improve other experiences?
It's both. So both and. So one of the things that we try and do with just our digital strategy in general is very similar to the UX mindset, where you're creating things, you're testing things, and then you're learning from what you test. And so if you look on any of the social media channels or even our website, you can kind of get a sense of what we're trying to provide. So we are very proud, of this country and living in America and the beautiful places that we serve. And so what we're trying to do as we kind of, as you go and visit these sites, is give you a chance to feel that way as well. And really kind of provide a place for you to, as you're experiencing, or as you're looking at these photos, to feel a part of it, a part of something larger. And so, and the way we kind of learn from that and move beyond that is we use the analytics on different platforms to kind of figure out what our audience actually wants and try and provide more of that. So whether it's looking at how people are sharing, our most recent Instagram post on their story, or seeing how they're kind of interpreting what we're posting, and receiving feedback that way. These are all these things that I like to look at, and I totally geek out about it. I mean, I will talk to anyone in this room about kind of what we're trying to do, because I'm pretty passionate about that and everything. And I feel like this is such an important time to kind of learn from who we're serving and provide that experience beyond just, here's a product.
Interesting there, talking about evoking a feeling when you're working for that customer experience. Most of the time when I think about customer experience and feelings, I think of just not having a terrible feeling, right? That the goal is just to make it so that this isn't painful to work with the government. In your perspectives, what kind of feeling are you trying to go for with your CX efforts? Are you trying to invoke something specific, or are you just trying to get away from that "I hate working with government services" kind of reaction?
It's probably the latter, or a bit of both. So I had mentioned that I was the UX design lead at FEMA, and one of the products that we're working on, at least for our first launch, our minimum viable product, was aimed at first responders getting grants for FEMA. So specifically fire departments and firefighters, those individuals. And customer experience was something that was fairly new to the team that I was working with, and bringing things like user research, user analytics, participatory design sessions directly with firefighters to understand how are they engaging with FEMA when they're receiving their grants and managing that grant lifecycle. In one of the engagement sessions that we had with one of our specific users, we had just recently launched a small segment of our product, and he specifically had stated to us, this product just works, and he's like, this product alone has just restored my faith in government. Going on to talk about how the old form and the old format of engaging with FEMA was really difficult and cumbersome to use. They avoided doing that as much as they could. But now it's delightful, right? And I think that when we think about customer experience within government, I think the bar, unfortunately, is set pretty low, because there is that mindset that, oh, it's government, it's going to be difficult to use. But I think that all of us up here really strive to go beyond that and really understand what our users need and what do they want to accomplish, and just being able to deliver that really will surprise our users.
Yeah, and I don't think, it feels that way now. People have the experience or the assumption you're going to go to a government website and it's going to be cumbersome, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think something that got me really excited about working in government was that, one, there was a lot of work to do. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. So many things that could improve experiences drastically by small changes that were just bringing things up to kind of industry best practice. But also that, now your average member of the public expects things to work a certain way, expects things to be accessible online, expects them to be able to be, usable and searchable. And so I was excited about the idea that, to me, like the best design is invisible design, where it's not necessarily about, oh wow, like this Department of Education has a flashy new logo, but it's about, oh, I can fill out the application for my, kids' school lunches without having to do 3 different paper forms and mail it 5 places, and go in person and make an appointment. So, to me, the ideal user experience in government is one, an 18F. For anyone who's not familiar, 18F is a small organization within the General Services Administration that works in partnership with all kinds of different agencies in a kind of consulting capacity on tech modernization projects and improving user experience in many, many different scenarios. And our tagline, I think, has been like improving user experience of government, which is very, very broad. But what's exciting about doing that is that it's very doable. There's an ability to simply by creating more consistency, raise the level of trust that the public has in government, so that it doesn't have to be persistent that people go to government websites and expect a poor user experience. They could actually start to encounter very common patterns, understand how things work, and that's a big thing that the U.S. web design system is also trying to promote.
And that, at first blush, can seem like such a small thing, just having that consistency through the websites. The other day, though, I was using a government website, and it redirected me to a .com, and I immediately was going, this just doesn't feel right. Am I no longer on a .gov? Am I safe? What's going on here? So having that consistency really does add a lot. One thing I heard from all of you here, the idea of lots of opportunities, lots of low-hanging fruit. Government isn't very good at this, so there's lots of work to be done. So obviously then this is an easy journey, right? If there's lots of low-hanging fruit and lots of work and government's starting at a low bar, this must be simple, right? No?
Well, I think it's interesting because one of the things, like, it's not just government is not good at it. It's really easy to be bad at it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I don't think it's just government. I see it everywhere. And I forget, I think it was, I heard it somewhere where it's like stuff wants to be bad, you have to fight to make it good. And that's kind of how I feel in a lot of products that, a lot of digital communications tools and things. Like, I think you nailed it when you were talking about simplicity and how it's so easy. Like, you almost don't notice it when it's good, and when it's bad, you notice it. You're like filling out form after form, and and there are just so many ways. We have the technology now, but the management of what do we do with the assets once we collect them and all this stuff, I mean, that is still, we're catching up to it. And data management and things like that, as well as just the experience we're providing people, is something that we're still going to need to catch up to. And there is this expectation, like there's an expectation where people, when they complain online or when they tell us something online, we can immediately fix it, and that will be like an updated thing. And I think, frankly, like nobody's quite figured it out, including government, but we're all trying to manage those expectations of people's like quick turnaround, kind of make it happen, that kind of thing. I mean, it's amazing to me that like volunteers who live in a certain area, when they move and want to volunteer with a national park or national wildlife refuge, it's not like a super simple system change for us, And there are things like that all the time where there's this expectation and we have to figure out how to make it. And that's kind of the fun of our jobs, but also it's going to be like a long haul.
I think a big issue that I faced in a lot of the projects that I work where I try to bring user experience principles into the work that we do with our projects is just an unfamiliarity of what user experience is. And so I've started off really as like a product designer in government, and I've really shifted into a UX strategist, particularly because I'm doing a lot more trainings and workshops with folks who are like, this seems so easy, right? Design is something that almost everyone understands, right? Like everyone understands good design. So, but how do you make that work? And one of the things that we find, just in terms of the way policies and regulations and the way our software projects are managed, end up being that, we want to try to add every single new feature into this product, right? And so, for example, at FEMA, it was we have this amount of money, we're going to add this and this and this and this. But what ends up happening is that if you keep adding on features and features without thinking about the UX strategy, a product holistically, it ends up being a really fractured experience for our users, right? So that's why you get one website redirecting you to a .com website, for example, versus having someone take a step back and thinking, well, what is the task analysis here? How is a user going to step through and accomplish these tasks? And what does that look like? I think it's easy to just pile things on, and that doesn't lead to a simple UX.
Yeah, and I think to your point about the needing to kind of do a lot of training and coaching, we find that a lot as well. And it's partially because the incentives a lot of times aren't lined up to be around user experience. They're about satisfying policies, satisfying compliance, security, and a lot of that's really important and is potentially even an opportunity for government to lead in certain areas of UX. Something working in the private sector, I was really impressed by efforts around plain language in government to create resources to help government resources be written in understandable language around Section 508 and accessibility compliance. Those are things that the private sector doesn't necessarily need to take into consideration, isn't mandated to do that. They're not mandated to serve an incredibly broad population, but is something that that government has to do and therefore can figure out how to do well. But this all gets at kind of the infrastructure needed to actually do user-centered design work has to do with creating the incentives for folks within the agencies and within programs to know that that is a metric that they're going for, is user experience, satisfaction, rather than perhaps compliance with certain regulations. And then also to I think it's like a shift in thinking about, and you were saying, we were kind of talking about this before the panel, it's a shift in thinking about always starting with who you're serving. And Danielle, you said something about the kind of like the morale raising. You should talk about that. I think it's really true.
Oh, I was just saying, one of the incentives that we're talking about, I think, comes when you've created something that people really like. And then all of a sudden, like, even if you're understaffed and it's just you've created this product that's actually helping people and you're getting that feedback, that's a huge morale boost. So I think, I was at Fish and Wildlife Service for about 5 years, working a lot with the biologists there, and a lot of them are updating websites. They're not necessarily thinking about, they're doing more than one job, but when they created something that really resonated with other audiences, that was a morale boost. That was something that they could actually take home and be like, hey, I did this. And so I feel like that's kind of the one of the reasons why you should, really put your audience. I mean, a lot of us have service in the name for a reason. We're trying to serve, we're trying to help. And the more we can learn about our audiences, I think that curiosity can translate pretty easily. You're in government for one reason or another, but that curiosity of like, who are they and what do they want? Fish and Wildlife Service is in charge of executing all sorts of laws, and so they end up putting up a lot of like legislative jargon on their website, but the people who are searching these animals are often kids. They're looking to look up different endangered species and things like that, and so even just a slight shift in like providing more information about these species could really engage different users, and it's a mindset shift, and it's not always easy internally to sell it. And, but I think that there's a value there for morale, honestly.
I just wanted to add two things as well. I think as I've moved into the leadership role, working with our partner agencies, one of the things that I've really come to embrace is that, empowering our employees, right? So a lot of people come into government to serve, like Danielle was mentioning. And what we find, though, like Julia mentioned, is that incentive structures aren't built around this. And so, on the teams that I've worked at or worked in, specifically working with employees to unblock, obstacles that they might be facing, making them, just like empowering them to push for the user and to keep that within the team. And then I would also say that, we all work within customer experience and user experience, but I am a really strong believer that UX works when everyone on the team is thinking about the end user, right? So it's leadership, developers, content strategists, QA folks, everyone has to be centered in terms of these are the user's needs and these are the user's goal, and identifying how the work that an individual is doing ties to that goal really helps to tie that back into empowering them.
So let's talk about that for a second. Some of the people, process, the tools that enable CX. You mentioned that it's everyone's job to ensure that there's a good customer experience, but whose job is it really, right? How do you need someone focused on CX in order to have a good user experience with all your apps and your services? What level does management have to be involved in that? Should they be involved in the user testing? Do they just have to have a leaning toward good customer experience? How do you establish that hierarchy, and whose job is it to really enforce this?
Well, it seems to me like, I wouldn't imagine that leadership would be in every usability test that you run, but they have a role in setting a goal and clearly communicating that this is a top priority to ensure a good customer experience or a good user experience. So making sure that that's an explicit goal, an explicit part of their strategic plan. And then I would say, most of the teams that we work with, currently I'm working with a team in the Air Force. There is not a dedicated customer experience or user experience person in this development team. We're working with a piece of legacy software, and we're trying to move them to some new development practices, as well as go to an updated application. All of the developers are involved to some extent in the user research we're doing, and there's been one developer deputized sort of to be the continuous UX UI point person. But it's really important that all the developers are taking part in the user research we're doing. We just did a session with a bunch of air crew and the developers in a room where we're just doing simple things like taking a look at the current homepage and getting everybody to talk about the things that they think work well, the things that they don't think work well, and sketch what their perfect one would be. And that, in comparison to the way that they had been doing it, which was one aircrew member coming up with a design and sort of validating it among a small circle, is even if the final outcome is not super different, is a really different approach to allow the development team to hear directly from the folks using it and to be able to go back to them later for usability testing. So I think, to me, like the tools that I've seen be really important in our engagements are creating the lines of communication between the people who are building the product or designing the product and making sure it works, and the people who are ultimately using the product. And sometimes we're working with products that are not for the American public, they're for government employees themselves. So I was also working on a project through the 10X program, which is an innovation and sort of accelerator within GSA, on creating tools for federal employees to use when they're trying to combine or exchange similar data from disparate sources, which happens all the time. There isn't necessarily a lot of infrastructural support for how these different federal employees who are trying to combine this data can do this, and they're doing the same thing over and over again. So sometimes our users are also government employees, and being able to, at any stage of a project, suss out which goals are in service of the business, which goals are in service of the users, and understand clearly how your work relates to those different ones is really, really important.
Excellent. And I want to come back to this topic, but before we do want to go off topic just briefly for a second. If you could talk a bit about 10X, because it's a program we're finding isn't as familiar to people in government, and this is for the government people out there. This is one for you. This isn't for everyone else. If you're a government employee, this is a program you're going to want to hear about.
Yeah, so 10X is run through the Technology Transformation Service, so it's 10x.gsa.gov, and it is a program that any federal employee can submit ideas to. Generally, they tend to be tech-focused ideas, but any idea for something you've seen be a problem that you think there should be some investment in. And so the way the program works is you submit an idea, which is basically just a 3-sentence pitch. The original the US web design system came from a 10x pitch of saying we should have some consistent components so we don't all have to make up what buttons look like at every agency. If your idea is selected, it's funded through a first round, a phase one. That's a short sprint to say, like, is this, the way they frame it is this a bad idea? Should we just, like, is there no way forward here? Should we just abandon this at this point? A lot of things make it through to phase two, which is this a good idea, where there's a more intensive discovery and with some prototyping, and then there's a max of 4 phases. And some projects go all the way through 4 phases. Some are accomplished their goal, or find new homes or other places after a phase 2 or phase 3. But yes, it is open to any federal employee to submit ideas, and the ideas are reviewed in rounds, I think at least twice a year, if not more than that.
So yeah, if you have any ideas or see anything in government you think doesn't really work quite right, you can complain to them. So Danielle, picking back up where we left off with the conversation about the CX specifically, how's that hierarchy work in Interior? If someone sees something that doesn't work quite the way they think it should, or you're developing a new app and the development process seems to be closed off from the user, how do you go in and enforce the need for these principles?
Good question. So there are 2 components kind of to my role as the deputy digital, all those Ds. Basically, one of the things that we're constantly doing is looking at our own website. So trying to make sure that it's mostly right now geared toward employees, with the exception of like a few pieces of content that we in our blog. So I focus a lot on those with my counterpart, and then there's also trying to make sure that we have the right technology for all of our bureaus too. And so that's the other part of my role, is making sure that we have like the terms of service we go through. And so I work closely with our technologists there. And so those 2 roles kind of, one, I'm trying to build out our website with content, but also trying to make sure that I empower the people in the bureaus to have what they need, technologically speaking. And that goes to like working to approve certain social media tools and that kind of thing. And so when there is something brought to my attention, whether it's customer related or any kind of experience related, I do try and take it seriously. And I think our role in government is to look long term, not just right away. Like, I'm not a business where I'm necessarily turning as quickly as I'd like to sometimes, but trying to look long term, like how is this going to help our public lands or different work that we're doing in the bureaus, whether it's USGS or, and so that's the kind of thing that I try and look to, is how will this help our customers across the board as much as possible, prioritize those projects over the things that that would otherwise be, like if there's a way for us to serve people quicker, I tend to prioritize that. And that's just how my brain works, because I feel like, it's one thing to do our jobs in a vacuum, but it's another thing when you can actually open it up and get engagement at a larger level. And I think when it comes to the work that we're doing in Interior, we touch so many lives. We do a lot of different kind of missions, I would say. And so it does come down to finding the technology that really helps empower our users, whether it's empowering our staff to talk to the customers more, or or otherwise. And so within just Interior, we're a really small team, so we can act pretty quickly. Like Larry Gillick is the counterpart, and he does a lot around accessibility, and we tag team a lot, and we brainstorm like different ways we can better talk and provide an experience. And then when it comes to the larger bureaus, it's just knowing the right people who are going to be excited about trying something new, and also making sure I listen as much as possible. And this goes online, this goes to, I'm constantly listening. That's like a huge priority for me.
Building that network there.
Totally.
Yeah, so you just know who to call.
Whether it's what our audience wants on social media, or it's seeing search analytics and how people are using both on our site and Google Trends. I try and listen as much as possible, both directly and indirectly, on what the needs are of people.
So just to touch on a little bit of something that you had mentioned, Danielle, one of the things that I've worked with a lot of our federal agency partners on is, they might be on a product, and how do they prioritize features, right? So, for example, I mentioned that FEMA, we launched our MVP, And we had immediately a boatload of tickets of improvements. And as a product person, as a UX person, how do you figure out what to work on next, and how does that map into a product roadmap and strategy? And what we find is a combination of a lot of different things, right? It is balancing what is the loudest thing that we're hearing from our users, along with technical requirements, right? Like what is feasible in terms of how soon can we build this, and how urgent is it, as well as business needs, right? So is this going to somehow improve business efficiency at the agency or improve some of the operational things? And what I find is that one of the things at the US Digital Service is that we do try to bring in design leaders. So when we partner with federal agencies, we try to show that value of why design is important and how this can be really helpful to meeting the agency's mission, and how sometimes you do really need someone at a higher level that has the experience, perhaps from the private industry or other government agencies, to help with the UX strategy. Julia had mentioned something about, we build a lot of tools for government employees, and one of the things that I've heard countless times, I've only been in government for a year and a half, but I've spent countless years in private industry, and so one of the things that I hear a lot is that typically if it's a government employee using the system, a lot of our product owners that I've worked with in the past have said, well, it can be a little bit hard for them. We'll just train them later, right? So it's a lot of, we'll just put it in and we'll explain this all if we train them how to use the system. And unfortunately, we don't treat our government users or government employees who are using the tool the same way that we do with our like the citizens that we might be serving. And so creating a space where a UX design lead can kind of like go head to head with our product owners and say, no, that isn't how we should do things here. And if we make this experience great for our government employees who are serving our users, then that definitely trickles down to our users.
Excellent. And thank you for that quick plug for our next panel that's coming up later, which is going to be all about improving the customer experience for your employees and how that trickles down. So that's perfect. We're going to open up for some questions after my next question. So start thinking about if you have anything you want to direct toward the panel. But just before we get to there, Jen, I wanted to jump on something you said. You mentioned the need to hire designers and get those people in. We know this is a critical need. There's a bundle of congressional and administrative mandates to do better CX. So it must be really easy to hire good designers, right?
It's a mixed bag. So with the U.S. Digital Service, we have, we're term limited, it's 4 years, and we're constantly trying to hire UX leads into our team. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is really going where everyday Americans live. So we do these roundtables where we go out and meet with folks in the community, and we share the successes that we've had, some of the failures we've had, and really just let the work that we've done talk to how design can really help government. Some of the things that we have to consider are folks that are relocating to DC, but I think that one of the biggest things that I've always pitched when I do recruiting is that there's nothing like working for the government in terms of our mission to really serve individuals, and I think that there is kind of this groundswell movement right now, especially in UX design and in product design, that there's this whole design for social good, and I think that our roles up here and the work that we do in government really tie well into that.
Yeah. It goes back to what you were saying earlier as well, with the whole government being poised to really do this UX well. It seems like it would be attractive to people who are trying to make things better.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, to your point about folks moving to DC, I think something that has been advantageous that 18F has seen in its hiring is where we work as an almost entirely distributed team. So being able to hire from anywhere in the US and have people working virtually does make hiring a lot easier. But I think we're really hoping. I think 18F's strategy has shifted over the years from we want to build the stuff for agencies to we want to work hand in hand with our agency partners and build capacity there. What I'd love to see would be more UX design and design positions in general being embedded within agencies to really have that capacity be part and parcel of the fabric of those teams.
Excellent, excellent. Do we have any questions out here? Yes. We got one over here, and then we have another one up here. Mike's coming right behind you.
Hi, I work with the federal government, and I used to work at federal government. And what I see, USDS is a different type of organization within an organization, and it has the support of the executive office of the president. So you kind of have easier time implementing new ideas and new frameworks. But in terms of just working on the agency side, what we found is that the problem with hiring people, especially in these new, for them, fields, is because the computer systems, just hardware, is really old. So for people to start working at these agencies, even though they would have the want and need to do work for the greater good, really affects their resume, because they need to be trained in older systems, and they can't really find jobs afterwards because they're not marketable. So it seems to me that the digital citizen experience and everything that you and we try to do is also a change management issue. So how do you approach working with the leadership on the agency level to actually change the thinking about this is not just pretty design, this is actually a holistic issue that needs to come down to procurement as well.
As you think about that question, Danielle, I'd like to direct it toward you first. You had mentioned to me in the past that you feel like at Interior, the CX journey is baked into that culture. That you know, from what this woman said and from my experience, that doesn't seem to be the norm or a natural state. So how did Interior get there to the point where it is something you can just go do?
I mean, so I can tell you that one of the things that happened probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago was the leadership at Interior kind of prioritized digital communications, and that's when we created some of the social media accounts. And but I think, going back to your point, it does come down to being really clear in like the technology needs that we have. Like, Interior is a small digital team. We have, 5 or 6 of us, like, just at the cabinet level. And one of the things that's been interesting is kind of making requests for the technology we need, like whether it's like a different type of computer or the software. And there is that element, and I can just say that it comes down to like not only working with leadership, but showing them kind of what you have to go through, and really kind of having that open line of communication, which isn't probably available to everyone. And so I don't know, I want to give you a takeaway of like, this will be easy when you leave. But the reality is, like, it is going to be different in every place. And I know with Interior, because not as many people were watching what we were doing, we were able to kind of be creative, 8, 9 years ago. And now it's kind of this situation where it feels baked in. Like, when I arrived, by the time I got there, social media was, I was allowed to post pretty things and not get yelled at. Whereas, like, there have been places I've worked where they're like, oh, you're only posting what's sexy. And I'm like, I don't even know why that's sexy to you. But that's the kind of thing where,
those fat bears.
I know, well, fat bears, real cute. But no, it's that kind of thing where that mindset, you do have to start somewhere, and you have to bring them with you in the same way we would bring along a customer. But you guys probably have.
Yeah, and actually, I'm just gonna, because we're running lower on time, I'm gonna direct your comments, if you don't mind, to the other half of the question, which was also about hiring people. You're working on a hiring pilot now. How are you getting the kids to come and work on COBOL and mainframe and the like?
Yeah, it's difficult. At USDS, we do really, really struggle with that. But I think it is just knowing, the thing that I really rely on is the mission. But specifically to, like, address that woman's concern, there's two things that come to mind. Yes, U.S. Digital Service, we are uniquely poised to, have this impact within government. But we do enter in agency partners where design isn't something that's even thought of, right? It's usually, hey, we have these technical requirements, you're the whiz kids, can you build this out? But actually what we find out is that, we let the technology, we come in underneath the guise of technology, and we actually work on people and processes, right? And design is a big part of that. And so things that I've done with our agency partners are, I would really suggest that you find other like-minded individuals in your agency so you don't feel alone. I was the sole UX designer on one of the projects, and there are tons of people on the agency Fed side that are really passionate about this, and I would say together, we would do lunch sessions where we would come up with business cases that we could present to leadership, and we would have each other's backs during meetings so we could talk about why this is an important thing, and eventually leadership ended up putting out a position call for a UX designer, and that wasn't something that they had intended at all. And it really comes down to, for me at least at the strategy level, aligning the mission of the agency and the things that they want to do, their business goals, with how the user goals, right? It's like, oh, you want to, reduce these costs and, improve these efficiencies. Well, you can do that by understanding what your users need.
Excellent.
Yeah, I have a really quick point to add to that. So, yeah, I 100% agree. One tactic with leadership is definitely to talk about user research as a risk mitigation strategy, as advanced customer service, basically doing the customer service before you have to do the customer service.
Preventative customer service.
Exactly. But then the other thing is, one real huge power of design is in making things visible. So when you have to go through, even just being able to visualize what it takes right now for somebody to achieve a very simple task, going through the current process and using the current technology, and sort of being able to show that and show what you're trying to get at with some other piece of technology, showing the time savings and cost savings, getting at those business goals. I think that can sometimes be a very helpful strategy. Often what we see is in the initial meetings, the most useful thing is just making things visible in a way that they hadn't been before, that really dramatize just how difficult it is to get something done the way it currently is, and being very forthright and confident in demanding the technology and the resources to support the work, because they're often, in the scheme of things, extremely small resources needed to upgrade that.
Excellent. Got time for one more. John was first.
So I know you guys just finished covering one of the first and big challenges, which is, how do you get the organization to wrap their head around user experience? Usually the other big one I tend to see comes afterwards, which is execution. How do you get the right visibility on your end user / customer to ensure that you're building to that need? And so, from your perspective, how do you find that right mixture of quantitative, qualitative attributes, data sets that helps, really identify that I'm building in the right way towards the right people?
And if I could add on to that, customers lie. Not on purpose, but they don't necessarily know what they want. So how do you deal with all that?
So one of the things that I did when I was at FEMA was build in a cadence for user feedback really early on. We made it a point to at least have X amount of user sessions per week, so it was built into the process. And on our sprint teams, the developers, QA folks, business analysts, they all had access to the user feedback that we were getting. And then it just becomes second nature, right? Like we release this thing, this is what the users say, and then we incorporate that into our future sprint cycles. The other thing about users lie, or users don't know what they want, right? I think that is why I really do push to hire UX designers, because there is a certain set of skills that we bring to the table in terms of analysis and synthesis, right? So we might hear this huge outswell of, hey, this feature isn't working, but UX designers we're trained to hone in to understand, is this just the loudest customer being loud, or is it actually an issue? And we kind of have, I don't know, I guess the inspector, the detective skills to really dig in to see what is it that the users need? So they might say one thing, but we really try to get to the why, right? Like, why do they want that? What are they trying to do? And we never really take anything at face value.
I just can't help myself. I have a very special set of skills. I will find you. I will find out what you want.
Final thoughts?
I would just say analytics is one of the biggest things. Like we created something at Fish and Wildlife because everybody was coming asking where they could get their fishing license. We just created like a page that basically sent them to where they wanted to go. And every time the fishing season comes around, like we see a huge boost in numbers. And I think just by digging into it, I've found that like that's how we know it's successful. And by the same token, when it's not successful, you kind of see the drop off and no return users. So
We are out of time, so please join me in thanking our great panel.
I'm excited to present our next session that is underwritten by our underwriter today, Adobe. Thanks again to Adobe for their support for today's program. We're so excited to have them on board. And now, here to talk more about the digital citizen experience is Bill Donnellan, Vice President of Federal Sales with Adobe.
Good morning, everybody. So I felt compelled to get up here and mention this is the second time in the month of August I've worn a suit, so I'm hoping that means I don't have to wear a suit again until sometime in like November. But before I got into that, there was another thing. Today's a first for me. It's a first in an interesting way. Not the first time I've spoken to a crowd like this, but the first time I've spoken to a crowd like this that contained the daughter of one of my good friends. And so I guess that's where I am in life now, which is really, really interesting to me. So changing the world through digital experiences. At Adobe, we feel like everybody has a story to tell, and that story, to be told effectively, needs to be engaging. So whether you're familiar with Adobe's Creative Cloud for creating engaging content, or the digital experience platform I'm going to talk a little bit about today, delivering that content and measuring the use of that content is critical to having a good experience. And I think the comments I'll make about a couple of stories I'm going to tell with our customers will be very much in line with the panel we just heard from. The first I'd like to talk about is some work we're doing with the US Census. So a couple of years ago, the former CIO of the Department of Commerce, Mr. Cooper, got up on the Hill and he was asked, how are you going to reduce the cost of doing the census? And his response was, we're going to use technology. And ever since then, there's been an effort to put in place a platform that would encourage people to take the census online and reduce the cost of to the citizens of getting all this very valuable data. And to do that successfully, a lot of things have to happen. One, there has to be a method to get out digital advertising to make sure that people that might potentially take the survey online know that they can take the survey online. For that advertising to be effective, you need analytics, to our earlier speaker. What they're trying to do at the census is drive people to a specific website where they can tell them what it means to take it online, and use analytics to kind of monitor their path to see where people come, what information they look at, and make sure that the proper information is presented to them so that they're encouraged to do this and they actually convert them into into an online applicant as opposed to an in-person applicant. Consistent with the previous group, I want to talk about why this matters. It costs $107 to send someone to a house to have them take the survey. It costs less than $1 to have them take that survey online. So tremendous savings to the government by getting people to do this. It's important that these capabilities are available via mobile. It's important that if someone begins a process in a mobile environment, that they can save out of that environment, go into a desktop and complete it later. It takes a little bit of time to do this, and someone might not complete it all in one setting. It's also important that analytics are monitoring what's going on as someone does this, so that I can see, hey, I thought that this section here would be something that could be done on average in about a minute, but when I look at my analytics, I see that people are spending 5 minutes on that. So something's off in the way I've designed this, and I've got to go back in and tweak that a little bit to make sure that it meets the objective. Analytics are also monitoring how many people make it all the way through the process. So when I bring a user online, I want to make sure that they complete the process online. So I've got to continue to monitor that. I'll talk more in a couple slides about some of the other interesting pieces about this, but at the end of the day, the census has the ability to literally save hundreds of millions of dollars by getting people to take this survey online. Another customer that we're working with, and I want to talk about the experience that they're having there, is Social Security Administration. The most common form at Social Security is the Social Security application so you can get a number. So just think about a scenario where a legal immigrant comes and they need to get a Social Security number. If you go to ssa.gov right now and you look at that application, it is a PDF form that's not even fillable. So they're very interested in how to digitize that. So we've been working on a pilot program with them to show them how to get that done. And so in the pilot process, the way this works is someone comes, as would probably be the normal case, they're on their mobile phone, they go to ssa.gov, they identify the form, they start the process. And all this, in today's world, that's usually going to start on a mobile device. Through this, they're registering so that they can provide the information. And what's important is that this doesn't just become a form fill, this becomes an engaged process. What Adobe's seen over our customer base is that when you make this a fully engaged process, that the online conversion rates improve by up to 60%. So what does it mean to have an engaged process? So you know what happens when you start filling out these things, you tell them, you give them your name, your address, your email. So immediately you send an email to them that says, thanks for doing this online. If there's anything that we can do, please reach out to us. Because oftentimes someone will start the process and complete it later. In this case, in the scenario that we built out, the person goes, they start the process on their mobile phone, but they only get to step 3, and then 3 days go by, and we find that they haven't completed the process. So what do? We already sent them a welcome email. Now we're going to send a follow-up email, and that email is going to say, hey, we noticed that you started the process 3 days ago, and you haven't had an opportunity to finish it. So here's a link to our FAQ. If you're having some problems, please consult this, and let's see if we can't get this done online. Again, the whole idea here is to keep your online users online. We have that email tagged with analytics, and we see that they do tag that. They go to the website, and we can actually see which FAQ they looked at because these two things are linked via analytics. And then I can see that they go from their desktop now, they go and they complete the process. I send them an email thanking them for completing the process. And if this would have been a different process, other than, once you get a Social Security number, you're done. But there are a lot of other forms and a lot of other processes that might have follow-up. So what I can, in my thank you email, I can also add text if this is a license or something along those lines. I can say, hey, click here if you'd like me to send you a reminder 9 months from now that your license needs to be renewed within the year. And so with this kind of engagement, as I said, I'm getting a 60% improvement. At a place like Social Security, what that means, Social Security has a big call center. They get 35 million calls per year. We know from just a lot of the things that are published publicly that a phone call into a call center costs about $50. So, if you think about this, a 2% reduction in that because I keep my online users online means about $35 million in savings to the government. So, great net return on something like that. I point out the value of this and the value of the census because you heard the group earlier talking, how do we get these things intertwined? From all the projects that we're working, the key that we're finding to get projects accelerated is tying something into the mission and the value of the mission and the cost of the mission so that these projects get funded so that you can focus on the experience and focus on either the citizen or the employee that the experience is designed for. So the last thing I want to talk about real quick is how do you do this? I think there's a lot of different technology from Adobe in the marketplace to drive these engaging experiences. When we talk about the platform, I think the easiest way to break it down is to talk about these 3 buckets of acquiring users, converting those users, and retaining them. So if we're thinking about who our personas are that we're trying to convert and what journey they're going to go through, the first step of that is acquiring them. So I need to have outreach so that I can hit them in social media, grab them via email, or attract them appropriately to my website. Then I need to convert them. And in that conversion process, you heard the group earlier talking about analytics. This is where I need to monitor what they're doing so that I can test different types of content. I can test different layouts of my mobile app or my mobile site or my .gov site to make sure that the right information's in the right place so people can complete their process. And then lastly, taking care of them, thanking them for doing this online, making sure they know what other services are available to them online so that, again, I can keep my online users online and I get maximum benefit out of the platform that I've developed. So the closing remark, I think, is the key that we're seeing. You heard it up here. The whole experience needs to be part of the entire design process, and it needs to be tied into some key business results so that you can actually get the funding that you need to be successful with these types of projects. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
All right, hello everyone. I am back, earning my salary today. Thank you all for sticking with us to the middle part of our program. We've got even more after this, so be sure to stick around straight to the end. For this panel, we're going to be shifting gears a little bit and talking a little bit more about the customer that's inside your agency, the employees who have to deal and deliver these services day in and day out. How can you improve their experience, and in turn, how does that trickle down to the citizen, the customer, whoever they might be? So just to kick us off, get us started, if you could, each of you, just who are you and why are you here today? Abraham.
My name is Abraham Marinas. I work at the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Federal Student Aid. I am the Chief of Staff for our Customer Experience Office. My primary role and responsibility is working with our core leadership team around strategic management. I also work on product development and employee engagement. And I'm here to kind of, learn from you guys and learn from the panel on how we can engage our employees to make sure they deliver a great customer experience for our customers.
Matt?
So I'm Matthew Costello. I'm Associate Director for Enterprise Management at the Interior Business Center, part of the U.S. Department of the Interior. For those of you maybe not familiar with the IBC, we are a federal shared service provider providing HR and payroll, assisted acquisition, and financial management to about 120 federal agencies and customers. My portfolio is really enterprise IT, enterprise financial management, customer engagement, and strategic communications. And so really our focus is how do we provide these services to our customer agencies and our sister agencies, both our home agency, Department of the Interior, and many others throughout the federal government.
Excellent. Ann.
Hi, I'm Ann Lowe. I'm from the Department of State. I'm the Knowledge Leadership Division Chief at the Department of State. My background is I'm a Foreign Service officer, so I've been representing you all over the world. On the IT side, I've worked with the United Nations in developing programs in order to improve policymaking by governments around the world. So one of the websites we've done is ger.co, which has business registration processes for all governments in the world that are online, and you can see which ones are user-friendly. There's a 10-dot rating. So we've taken that expertise and brought it back home, and I'm working now with people throughout the State Department trying to go and bridge the gap between what our information resource management provide for us in technology and what our diplomats and other employees are able to use. So we spent the past year trying to use the cloud-based tools and figure out what are the best use cases, how do we get our users excited about them. And I will start off by saying it's a challenge.
Yeah, I'm excited about this panel. The last panel was great because we had some real UX, CX experts. You three, I love the use cases that we're going to be able to dive into because there's a lot of uniqueness here and a lot of lessons I think can be pulled out. Matt, I want to start with you because your position, you kind of have the inception of user base, right? You have your the business center employees, which then support interior employees, which then support other government agency employees, which then support, first responders, what have you, which then support community. You go all the way down the line. So how do you map out who is your customer?
It's a really difficult question. I mean, even when we talk about, saying 120 customer agencies, well, what does that really mean? I mean, some areas it's, an entire cabinet agency, in other areas it's a small component. You look at just the Department of the Interior, for example, we are interwoven with the day-to-day service in Interior. We provide payroll for the Interior's 70,000 employees who are in 2,400 locations, from wildland firefighters to backcountry rangers to USGS scientists. We have a number of people in Guam and Micronesia and other areas like that. And so what we really try and do is start at the system level and then just build down. And if we're operating payroll, let's take a look at all the places that this follows through there. We also, frankly, depend quite a lot on a really strong relationship with our customer base. And really it's a collaborative operation and relationship, because in many cases they're designing. We can only provide kind of the back end service. We're really reliant on them as the face of this. Many of our end use employees who are using, again, payroll, have no idea it's being provided by us. They may work for the Department of Transportation. They think their payroll is provided by the Department of Transportation because the interface they see is branded with transportation. And so it's really that collaborative relationship that really helps us move forward. And so it's wonderful because they actually know their end users, their employees better than we ever could. At the same time, it's giving up a certain level of control to us. And so we spend a lot of time focused on the user group meetings and the change councils and things like that to really bring everybody together and understand that for shared services to be successful, it has to be a collaborative relationship on both sides.
Excellent. We'll get more to those shared services, in particular your payroll issues in a bit, but Abraham, go ahead.
And for us, our customers, we're the agency, Federal Student Aid, that provides, financial aid to go to college. So if you ever apply for a FAFSA, don't hate me, pay back your student loans. We're the agency that manages those processes. So our primary customers are student, parents, and borrowers. So we typically, every year, we get around roughly 18 to 19 million FAFSA applications, the free application for Federal Student Aid. So if anybody's applied for that, that's us over here. And we disperse annually roughly around $120 billion of aid, which is a combination of grants and student loans. So we primarily, our team is focused on delivering, hopefully, a good experience on how to learn about financial aid, apply for financial aid, and obviously repay back your student loans. So that's our primary focus, to making sure our employees are energized, are engaged in order to deliver those services to our customers.
So let's start there then, because I think that paperwork intensive, that has to do with money, so it can be very stressful and all that stuff. What happens to your employees if the user interface that the citizens are engaging with isn't good? If it's tough for them to interact with the website, what does that mean for the student aid employees in your office?
We get a lot of comments on social media. So on Facebook, on Twitter, we get a lot of feedback saying, hey, you guys are doing well, or you guys suck, whatever they may be. Our employees take that feedback, and they really are passionate on delivering that great customer experience. So when we see areas that we are deficient in some of our customer experience, we take a look at it, we digest it, we figure out ways to improve that customer experience. And then one thing that we do with our employees is that we have a dedicated team that actually does social media. Since 2012, we've been on Twitter and on Facebook engaging with our customers. Back then, we used to do what we used to call office hours, which is once a month, we would engage with our customers and answer their questions. And that became very popular for us. So what we did is that instead of holding it once a month, why not engage with our customers on a day-to-day basis, so that way we have that direct connection and our employees can see what our customers are saying on a regular basis. So today, in the past several years, we pretty much talk to our customers pretty much every single day on social media. So that way our employees can see the feedback on how we can improve their services.
And if your customers aren't happy, you don't hear about it on social media.
No, we hear about it directly with telephone calls. And that's actually one of the big challenges, is our public affairs office manages that relationship with the wider world. We're trying to make sure that the positive user experience also carries through to our employees and the diplomats out in the field. And that's really a challenge, because when you get the complaints from the American people or from a foreign country asking a question, our systems and our processes are all geared up to respond as quickly as possible in order to fix that. When you get a problem or a challenge from some fellow employee, unless it's a very, very senior employee, the processes aren't in place to go and respond as quickly as that employee would like. And it's really a culture change. And the difficulty that we're seeing is the technology with apps in the cloud. They're changing so rapidly that our old processes for responding to employees concerned, where you would call the IT service center, and then the IT service center would figure out who to direct your issue to, and you might get an answer within an hour or within 3 days. That doesn't cut it with employees anymore at all. And it also, by the time you get the answer to the question, the employee's moved on and is working on something else. So we're having to rethink actually how we do our day-to-day work, and we're having to start to document processes that people were able to just do intuitively. They knew, you sat at your desk, you knew how to do your job. Now you're being asked to write it down, and then people to evaluate what the process is and can you streamline it. And that's a big change internally.
I imagine it's particularly difficult in your space, as the answer for someone here in DC is going to be very different from someone in Iraq or in other countries throughout the world, where they might not have access to the same apps, they might not have access to the same infrastructure. The security systems that they have to go through to log on might be different. How do you manage, and also your customers, the employees, they move around a lot too. Right. So it's every time they get to a new station, is it a different protocol for how they use their tech, and how do you manage all that?
It's hard, I have to say. Like when I started in my position, there's a YouTube video that shows people flying on a plane while the plane's being built. And that's essentially where we are. We're getting these new technologies in. We've got our users around the world that have to conduct diplomacy for the American people. They have to have access to information, but the information, the way they get that information is changing. The way their desktops look is changing. And going around to all the posts worldwide, we have legacy systems, and so it's hard to move all of those into the cloud. So it's really a multi-year process to try to get us into the cloud completely. And during that transition period, which is what we're in now, the challenge is you can be interacting with a colleague, say in Iraq, and they'll have different functionality at their disposal than you might have in Washington, D.C. And then you don't know, is the problem the connection? Is it bandwidth issue? Is the problem that the app doesn't work, that there's a bug in it? Is the problem the security settings? Or is the problem that I don't know what I'm doing? Or that my guy on the other side doesn't know what he's doing? And so that's really a big issue, and that's what our office has been focusing a lot on. What we decided is to try all of the technology internally within our own group, and learn how to use it. And then in the process be able to discover if there's bugs in it or if the security settings create problems for the user experience. Because a lot of the value proposition that the private sector has with moving to the cloud, they get the whole package. We, because of our security settings, because of the different places that we're operating, we don't get the complete package, and we don't get it right away. So some of that value proposition, I think ultimately it's there, but until you're fully there, there's a lot of frustration, I think, and that you have to be cognizant of.
Yeah. I think Ann touched on a really important point within this is, as we're working to migrate to the cloud and plan 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future, we're still having a problem of getting everybody to the same baseline. Yep. And that adds to the complexity of this when you're trying to have someone in Iraq and find out what their connectivity is and where they may be having issues. We have it with Indian country, and that last mile is really our crux. And so when we're talking about this, how we're designing for that and all the different use cases that we don't know, when we're not all at the same starting point, that's part of the difficulty.
And then also kind of adding to that, as you guys know, with the employee viewpoint survey, obviously all the federal employees take that survey. One of the things at our agency, we noticed that folks were providing their feedback around, give us the tools and resources to get our job done. As we kind of heard in the previous panel, if you want to focus on the customer experience, give the employees the tools in order to develop those experiences for your customers. And one of the things that we heard loud and clear is saying, look, from a pure IT spec conversation, our laptops are slow. Our tools to interact with each other, this email-based solution does not work. How can we improve that experience within our employees? So what we did is we went to that baseline, we deployed the laptops, and one of the key things, and we had some really old hardware, was using actual hard drives. Once we switched over to laptops that had SSDs, oh my gosh, people were just so happy and ecstatic, because instead of waiting 45 minutes to boot up your computer, it actually takes less than 2 to 3 minutes just because it's using SSD. So again, If you want to have a great customer experience externally, making sure that your employees have the tools and resources. We also are using, migrated to the cloud by using Office 365, using those applications within the browser instead of using native applications allowed us to collaborate and share documents versus emailing those documents. And we also have a platform within Office 365 that we're able to collaborate with our external contractors or federal agencies, so that way we're not sending big emails. We know that the data, the content is secure based on our cybersecurity procedures. So again, providing those tools that may be just simple goes a long way to engage your employees, so that way they feel that they have the capability to deliver those services for your external customers.
Excellent.
Could I follow up on that? That we're also in the situation with the Office 365 environment, and one of the cool things that we've been able to do is get off-prem, which means on our personally owned device, we can have all of our work apps in one place, and you can get into them with your log on to your personal device and then your fingerprint, which for us is the single sign-on issue is huge, because typically we have multiple sign-ons and they change every 60 days or so. And so the whole password issue is a big challenge. But being able to have access to that information on the road is a huge sell. So I think that's one of the wins, that if you can find with the move to the cloud stuff that your employees will get excited about, that they'll see immediate value in being able to use, that can really help build a positive momentum, because there's a lot of other stuff that they look at and they're like, too many choices, too many options. One of the big challenges that we have is that depending on which environment you're in, the apps function differently. So when you're on this off-prem, your app functions in one way. When you're at your desktop at work, if you're in the desktop app, you'll get full functionality, but if you're in the browser, it'll function differently. And then if you're at home teleworking and you're on your desk, it functions differently again.
And then you're in China trying to access it. It's going to function differently again.
It
doesn't function at all.
But so that issue, and getting ahead of that by letting people know that the cool thing is you've got all this mobility, but you have to remember where you are when you're using your apps. And that was something that, for instance, we figured out in using it internally before rolling it out to the whole department, to kind of get ahead of the confusion level, but it's still absolutely there.
And the problem with that, though, is you don't own these apps. You can't fix that problem, right? You can't go to Microsoft or any other vendor out there and just say, hey, we've got a different experience across these things, fix it, or we're just going to go buy someone else. You don't really necessarily have that flexibility, and if you're not building them in-house, you certainly don't. So how do you manage that expectation with your employees? How do you, another issue I know that you have, how do you build the training modules and the systems when every person's experience is going to be different from day to day, minute to minute, person to person?
What we've done on it is try different models. One of the things we've done is player coach model, where we get the provider to be the coach, and we get our really power users to be part of a team, and we use the cloud collaborative environment in order to learn to use the apps with those power users. And then we take that group of advocacy group and bring them in to answer questions that the users are having, so that instead of having to wait until a ticket is generated and then you get somebody from the IT service center, some of the questions will be able to be answered directly by that advocacy group. And then we're also developing, my office in the knowledge leadership area, we have a thing called Diplopedia, which is like Wikipedia, but it's for diplomats, stuff that we do, internal processes. And we're building a How Do I platform that gives people kind of step-by-step instructions. So I think there's a lot of need to put a face and a person and customer service to helping with it, because people are confused.
I'll let you get one more on that. You mentioned the Diplopedia. Is it going to be wiki style, where diplomats who are using, if they come up with a process that they think is working for them, they can add to
That's
the
exactly what we have, and it's but it's on our intranet system, so like up to sensitive but unclassified.
Very cool.
providing the resources is great, but a key thing to use those resources is providing training. In this use case, specifically for Office 365, I know for our office and within a customer experience office, I'm known like the tech enthusiast, so I'm like, okay, we have a lot of great tools, folks know how to use it, so I just made it a point to just do lunch and learns pretty much as I could in order to train folks, live demo, this is how you share a document, this is how you use Office 365. And that proved to be very positive among our employees within the customer experience office. And as you guys probably heard, like-minded people think alike, so word got around, so I started talking to different offices within federal student aid and realized that there was a need for additional training. Great, we got all these great tools, but people are still doing things like they used to. This is supposed to help you automate, be more efficient, more effective. So I got together with other folks and said, how can we bring more training of Office 365, OneDrive, Skype, Teams? How do we train people how to use these cool applications? So we got together as a team. Like I said, this is just pretty much groundswell. Just let's all get together in a room, figure it out. And then we started to develop more core training to share with the whole entire enterprise within federal student aid around Office 365. And believe it or not, we got a lot of people from our local office, our regional office, participating and saying how helpful this was, because again, you could go to a site, read about it, but actually asking questions, showing a live demo, that went a really long way with our employees. And I think that's proven to be successful. Is great resources are good, but training is even better to learn how to use those resources.
And what I heard from both of you there, which was not just developing training, but letting the users help develop your training.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other piece I would say that was really important there is the business process and the change. A lot of the times with the training, we tend to go, here's the tool, here's the things the tools can do, but we don't tell you, here's when to use the tool, or here's the business process that you've been doing in this way and should change because this tool is slightly different. A hammer is a hammer, but a sledgehammer is very different than a ball peen hammer. And so we say, here's how you use a hammer, that's great, but we need to tell people, okay, we're not building a house now. We're trying to knock down a wall. There's a difference in how this system is used. And so I think really looking at the early on piece of the business process change and explain to people, not just here's the new tool, you press this button, you press this button, it's this new tool is gonna help you here. And this is where you're gonna see really the benefits of that if you start to shift in the way you use that.
So Matthew, I want to stick with you for a second and talk, because you're in the midst of a pretty hard CX problem, right? Mm-hmm. As one of the payroll providers in the government, you all are about to start implementing the new pay that's coming out of GSA. That's going to be kind of a stepped process, would be a nice way of putting it. What are you dealing with, and how are you dealing with it?
We're excited about it, but it's still so new. It's trying to
go
dig
primer
through.
for what is new pay?
So new pay is an initiative to move payroll to off-the-shelf software as a service. Right now there are 4 federal shared service providers that provide payroll, and each of us have our own homegrown system. We love to say we love our system. It's the most modern. It's also 30 years old. So that should tell you, what we're looking at. And within that, we provide payroll to 49 customers. Some of them very large, Department of Interior, Department of Transportation, Education, some of them very small foundations with 5 employees. And so what we're really looking at in our focus is really trying to map out what this looks like, to understand that the interfaces will have to be similar but different, because shared service, the value is in the commonality. And so trying to find out what we can do, what we can build now, and map out how the process is going to go, because we know there's going to be surprises somewhere along the way. And so really our focus now is sharing as much information as possible, but gathering more information. Some of our customers have been with us 20 years, and so there's just knowledge that's retained by employees of how this works. Now going back and trying to actually map that so we can plan for a transition is absolutely huge for us.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to dig into one specific pain point that you might have and kind of set the stage for it. So new pay, you're going to be bringing on this new COTS payroll solution, but that doesn't do the other half of the solution you provide, which is time and attendance, correct? So, and then you also have that inception problem that we talked about earlier, where your customers are the agencies who then have to get the money, and if you miss payroll, that's a huge problem, right? Those employees aren't going to be able to deliver those services because they're going to be stressed out. So you've got the frontline employees, you're doing that for them, for their payroll. You've got your customer agencies who have to administer that payroll. Then you have your own employees who are now going to, at least for a time, have to use a new system, the new pay system, in conjunction with the old time and attendance system. How are you managing all that experience?
It's a very good question. It's something we're excited about and a little challenged with. The focus right now is payroll. There is some expectation that hopefully new pay will include time and attendance, originally designed to include time and attendance as well. Now I think that they've focused on payroll. Let's get over that hurdle, and then we'll build on the other things. And so for us, it's really understanding the payroll piece. We have the only integrated time and attendance and payroll system in the government, and so we really see this payroll piece as kind of being the spine, the backbone of all of our other integrated systems within it. Leave scheduling and things like that as well. And so what we aim to do, ideally is it's a seamless transition that we put an interface on it so that most employees never see the change.
And when you say employees, you mean which stage of employee?
I mean the end user employee who's using our system once every 2 weeks to put in, I worked 8 to 5, verify. When we start to move back a level then to our HR specialists who are putting in and checking there, that's where it's going to be interesting. That's where the change management process is really going to be. But the more we can map now and really start to find where we're going to find those rubs. Because the thing is, 49 federal agencies that we're supporting, everybody's system's a little different, everybody's logon is a little different. How do we get to that and start solving those problems now and making sure we're clear into what we're tackling rather than just jumping in saying, yep, we're going to do this and then move over, because it's payroll. You can't get payroll wrong. I mean, I can't go and miss a payroll disbursement to a Supreme Court justice. That generally is not going to go well for any of us. And so figuring that out, and then also understanding we're going to have to run parallel systems for a while. And what does that interface look like, and what do we do with that transition as well? It's interesting.
We've set the problem. It sounds like the answer is mapping and communication.
Mapping, communication. Once we have it mapped, then it's starting into the change management process as well, and the business process changes. Again, our users, we have great customers who've been with us forever. They're used to their system and the way it's worked, and so trying to support them and what that change is for more of the power users, and then make the end user, that person just entering their time, once every 2 weeks, make that as seamless as possible.
Excellent. So I'd like to pick up on one more use case, everyone. We'll talk about your Omni-Channel experience and that journey that you're going on. Then we'll open it up to the audience for some questions. So talk to me about what you're doing to integrate your contact centers, that Omni-Channel approach, and what that's going to mean for your employees and their day-to-day jobs.
So what we're doing is at Federal Student Aid, we're embarking on an initiative called NextGen, which is pretty much rebuilding from the ground up the experience for our customers and for our employees. So at a very high level, what we're working on is what we call the Digital Customer Care Platform, which is first enabling a one place where, as I mentioned before, where students can learn about financial aid, apply for financial aid, and manage their student loans. So we're consolidating a lot of our sites into one site, so that way the student has that experience, and that site is going to be mobile responsive, and a lot of our sites are mobile responsive. And part of that effort, even last year, listening to customer feedback, was to make one of our sites mobile responsive, the one that a lot of people visit, which is FAFSA.gov. So last year in July, we released a mobile responsive web of FAFSA.gov, and then shortly thereafter, we released our first native application called My Student Aid, where you could apply for financial aid and check the balances of your student loan. So that was one of the key initiatives to improve that user experience by listening to our customers and delivering what they've pretty much been asking for years. The second component of that is around the contact centers. As you guys know, in the federal government, we love contact centers. We love to have different telephone numbers. Our initiative is to say, look, customers just need to know one number, and then we, as an agency, will figure out where we need to route you. So we're working on delivering that 1-800 number where customers can can call, and that way we can route them to appropriate experience. But just doing one number is just one component. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes component, which is creating a tool and working and developing a tool, a CRM tool, customer relationship management, where we can see the 360 view customer experience, to your point, omni-channel. So if you interact with us on the web, you call us or use a virtual assistant, guess what? We have that record, we can track it, and we know your previous transaction history.
I imagine that's great for your employees at those contact
Yes.
centers. They don't have to track that info down.
So that's the first user experience. Now, from an employee perspective and contractor perspective, yes, now instead of having multiple tools, you have one tool where everyone is using, including our employees, including our contractors. We provide the technology stack. So that way, they're not fumbling around in 10 different screens. They can go to one screen, take a look. All right, the customer needs help. We see that you called or interacted with us in the past couple of days. Here's the information you need. So that way, from an employee standpoint perspective, instead of being frustrated and saying juggling multiple tools, now you can actually focus on the customer and deliver the services to the customers.
Excellent, excellent. Do we have any questions from the audience here?
Hi, thank you. My name is Alton King. I'm at DOJ. This question is more so for Ann. How has the UX/CX been implemented for locally engaged staff and also amongst the civil service and foreign service side of that everyone's working together in being good customers to each other, but also to broader, because I know, as you said, public affairs, public diplomacy handles a lot of that, of course, consular affairs too.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much for the question. I'm going to address it in two different ways. In Washington, one of the things that we've done is our office and within the IRM family and several of the other bureaus, including consular affairs, are going out and getting trained, actually using a lot of the OPM training on Six Sigma techniques, and then also on human-centered design techniques. So we're trying to take our existing employees, the civil servants, foreign service officers, and the ones that are interested, expose them to that approach so that we can build a culture that is looking at your colleague as essentially a customer that you want to figure out what can you do internally to make it work better. And it's not just that the only customer is the outside or the ambassador, that actually within, at the lateral level, really treat your colleagues as customers and try to fix processes to get things done, figure out what the root problem is. It's a challenge because a lot of these processes with the human-centered design, with Six Sigma processes, there's wonderful tools to identify the issues, but they take time to actually learn how to use, and then they take time to implement. And our culture is a lot more, let's just get it done and move on to the next thing. And this process of having to step back and really think it through and plan, we end up, I think we'll end up with much better results. We'll end up with streamlined processes, but you have to get everybody on board with that. On the abroad with the locally employed staff, each embassy is kind of, everybody's trying to go and get into the modernizing the technology. And so at overall, the approach is to try to bring everybody on board working together. That some of the challenges are around the world, there's different labor laws. So for instance, accessibility, like with off-prem, that we now have about 12,000 users on it. People super excited about it, but in many countries, it's not possible to make that accessible to locally employed staff because of labor laws. And then also in other places, there's security concerns. As Americans, we're able to access our information regardless what the work hours are that we tend to be on, but that's not the case everywhere. So there's a lot of work to figure out how to do it effectively across the countries, and we're trying to go and get best case user case stories from around the world, bring them together and share the information and use the collaborative tools to actually share the information, because that's the big thing that we found is just giving people access to all these great apps and all the possibility of being mobile and doing cool things isn't enough. They have to have a project and a reason to be bothered learning how to do something differently. And if you can possibly give them that opportunity, like we're working with the Foreign Service Institute to use the new technology as just the way they present their courses, so people will learn it while they're learning something to go abroad to do their regular work better.
Almost trick them into learning something.
Yeah,
Eat
exactly.
your IT vegetables. Yeah.
And do it in a context where they're not pressed with a deadline and they're not saying, I just need to get this memo to the front office, and you're telling me that I have this cloud-based document that everybody's collaborating on it and I can't see track changes.
And you know, I thought Matthew had a messy customer map, but the more you talk about your diverse customers and the things you deal with, I do not envy your job at all. Do we have more questions? One up here.
Hi. So my question's more around the how you do omni-channel. So for example, one of the things, I'm in an acquisition community, and we have multiple contracts, existing vendors. So here we are, we want to go to an omni-channel experience. So how do you do that? Do you write it into contracts? Do you modify contracts? And then how do you deal with the added cost of doing that and getting that, the value of that cost communicated to leadership so that they'll approve it?
I think first you need to have leadership commitment that you want to move in that direction. That doesn't happen in a silo. When you talk about omni-channel, that means as an agency you have executive leadership who's focused, determined on executing on that. Kind of doing that from the ground up, you can, but it's going to take a little bit longer. But selling and providing the proposition value, the return on investment, because you're going to get a lot of, first of all, customers are going to be more excited to use your product. They're going to accomplish their task, but also from an ROI perspective, you're going to see that you have some operational efficiencies and effectiveness that could potentially lower your overall cost versus having all these services across different offices or across different channels. So first and foremost, having that leadership buy-in is key. Number two, once you have leadership buying, depending whether you do in-house development or you outsource the current experience you have, once you determine which path, then if you're going to acquire it, then have an acquisition strategy. So if you know a contract is going to end within the next year, do you develop a sequencing plan in order to start working on a recompete for that particular product and services, so that way you can eventually transition off that? If you already locked yourself into a long-term contract, then working with your acquisition software to see if there's any way to modify the contract. That's from an acquisition strategy perspective. The third component is understanding your business requirements. What are the requirements that you're trying to build from a user experience perspective? I know what helped us out a lot is creating a journey map, understanding how our customers interact with us. For us specifically, at Federal Student Aid, our customers interact with us through digital properties and call centers. So we developed a journey map to ensure that if we're going to create a omni-channel experience, we map out how our customers interact to us, so that way we know at a very high level that in order to create an omni-channel experience, you need to have a standardized technology stack where the customer interacts, we get the data, and our customers always have up-to-date information. And then from an employee/contractor perspective that are providing the services to our customers, they're now, again, juggling multiple IT systems. They're looking at one and can see the 360 view of the customer experience. So if you look at those 3 steps, that at least can kind of direct you on how to, at least at a very high level, tackle an omni-channel experience.
You also gave me an idea for a future panel. I think what we need to do is get some acquisition professionals up here, and they can do like, here's how to provide a good customer experience for your contracting officer. Got one in the back there, and that'll probably be our last one. Back corner.
Hi, good morning. I'll stand up since I'm on the way back and no one can probably see me because I'm short. My question was, do any of you use tools like customer relationship management platforms to help bridge that employee experience, customer experience? I call it like the 2 sides of the coin, so that you have that visibility. Could you speak a little bit to that and how it works where you are and how you kind of got there?
So I can answer that question. So at Federal Student Aid, or FSA, several years ago, we launched, as part of an initiative in the past administration, on collecting feedback from our customers. We call it the feedback system. So this is where customers can file positive feedback. I know, right? Or they could file complaints or anything related. It could be, you can log in, it could be anonymous. You can file your complaint there or feedback. So to your point, what we did is that we use Salesforce as our CRM platform in order to provide, first of all, that end user experience, and then from an internal perspective, employees had access to the tool. So as you could imagine, if you're asking for feedback, not one office has that expertise, so you have to have different offices involved. So what we did is we established a standard operating procedure that when the feedback came in, we developed SLAs and said, okay, if it's this topic, then we will route it to the specific office. And then those employees had access to the tool to see the case/ticket that came in through Salesforce, so that way they could provide their response within that given SLA. So it took a lot of time, it took a lot of meetings, a lot of user feedback from our customers, a lot of our internal customers, our employees, to get feedback on how to develop the system, and a lot of training. So again, for a lot of these folks, they were new to the Salesforce platform, so we had to sit down with them, train them on a regular basis, have several meetings related to that, and then have metrics to make sure that we were abiding by the SLAs, people were using the tool, and that they were providing ultimately the response that the customer wanted to, well, not necessarily hear, but providing them the response based on their inquiry they submitted to the feedback system. So again, it was a multi-year project for us to get there, but ultimately establishing that one common platform, training, and making sure employees are able to access and use it is a key thing.
And with that, we just ran out of time, so that worked out perfectly. Please join me in thanking our great panel.
I'd like to go ahead and introduce our next session, which is produced by our underwriter, Amazon Web Services. Again, we want to thank AWS's support for today's program. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. So now I'd like to welcome to the stage Dan Casson, Senior Manager of Amazon Web Services Worldwide, Public Sector Partners.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Happy to be here. Thank you for having us. I have 10 minutes. Everybody here is a network architect, correct? Security specialist? Just kidding. So you talk about cloud, like what could there possibly be? And I speak at sessions like this occasionally. I'm assuming a lot of digital design, user experience folks here, correct? And how to relate cloud to that sometimes is not immediately apparent. And I want to first start, how many people here feel they have a good understanding of what the cloud is? Like, yeah, I got it. Okay. It's like 10%. That's good. That's actually better than normal. It's okay. I want to start with just a high-level. By the way, I want to start with an introduction. So I've been with AWS about 5 years now. My responsibility, my team's responsibility, is to help solution providers who have software solutions bring them to government agency customers. And the idea is that there are a lot of great commercial solutions available out there that will help agencies meet their mission goals. Sometimes those bridges don't connect, though, whether it's there are security requirements that they have to get through or just contract vehicle requirements and other things too. My job is to help make that happen. And that makes government agency customers much happier because they can use better solutions, get their job done faster, and helps build the whole ecosystem. So I work a lot with this, and I've been working with cloud for a decade or so now. The definition hadn't changed much, though. And at a high level, cloud is the on-demand delivery of IT services at a pay-as-you-go model. Basically, I have a choice. I can go buy a big server, and I can install my stuff on it and put it on the internet, and voila, I'm done. But the problem with that is I have to put all the upfront expense. And for an organization that's trying to be really agile and innovative, oh gosh, I got to drop a couple $1,000,000 just to get out the door. Hard to be innovative when that's the case. So why don't I just pay for what I use? If I'm only going to use a little bit of server time over time, instead of paying millions of dollars, I'm going to pay hundreds of dollars. The only thing I'd add to this definition right now is that that cloud is more than just pay-as-you-go utility services. What you're using is global infrastructure that is run with the best practices, best processes available. So what you're using is professionally run global infrastructure that allows you to scale to any level or to any usage that you need, providing services that are going to be really valuable to you, and yet you're paying only for what you need at any given time. That's good. Okay. So why does it really matter, though? Why do you care? Why is a digital designer or someone thinking about user experience? We're not network architects, security specialists, doesn't matter. And I think it was Danielle in the first panel that mentioned this. Cloud is one of those things, and infrastructure is one of those things that when it works, you don't think about it, right? It's not until it breaks that you start thinking about it. And how many people here have built a really cool, great solution, beautiful, and you put it up and all of a sudden it crashes under user load? Or there's a security breach. Now, you might have spent all the time in the world putting together a fantastic user experience, but you just lost all the trust from your end users and from the people who use your system. And that's really what user experience is about. It's about gaining that trust so people feel confident using what you're trying to do. So I know if I'm going to put all this time into invest all this time into building a system that has a wonderful user experience, I want to put it on a platform that just knows it's going to work and it's going to be secure. And really, that's what the cloud enables. The cloud is an enablement, basically an environment that enables those digital solutions to run and to be as scalable as they need to be, or to be scaled down as much as they need to be, and gives all the tools to the people who manage the platform to make it the most secure possible. And it's good, because now it's one less thing for those of us who are creating experiences to have to care about. And that's why it matters to you, and why people who are in the business of building solutions should be asking, or really embracing cloud, saying we need to put this on there because we don't know. It might be used by 100 people, might be used by 100 million people. And I want to be able to manage that, and the cloud helps with that. And good news is I've already heard it several times this morning. And many agencies, I would say that the preponderance of momentum is moving to the cloud throughout agencies. We have over 4,000 government agencies globally that are moving there. Everybody is interested in it in general, and that's good. And there's some reasons behind that. I mean, the benefit of offloading that responsibility and not having to maintain my infrastructure is good. And that's really the first reason people go to cloud. Say, hey, I don't want to spend all that money in my own data center. I want to have that operational expense. Great. The big thing, and the key value that people are getting out of cloud, really, its cost is great. Improved agility is fantastic. There's a great quote from John Edwards, CIO of CIA, said, it used to take them 6 to 8 months to deploy a new server environment. And they do that now in a couple of minutes. And that means that they can deploy new solutions that meet their mission goals that much faster. Can you imagine having to wait that long when you know there's a threat to the nation? Wait, okay, we'll get the servers up in like 6 months and we'll see what happens then. That's not acceptable. But now they don't have to do it anymore. They can leverage the cloud environment. So it's that increased agility and increased confidence in a platform lets them focus on the mission and be more innovative about the mission. And that's really what we're trying to do, is get the infrastructure concerns out of there. And in order to do this, if you're going to say, I'm going to put my solution onto somebody else's platform, I'm going to run it in the cloud as opposed to the server in my closet here, you have to have confidence that that's going to work well. How do I know that if I'm using Adobe Experience Manager running on AWS, that it's run in a way that would be as good, if not better, than government agencies? Well, the good news is we have federal processes that accredit and authorize that. So people here probably heard of Fedramp. It's exactly what that is. Basically, Fedramp is an approval process that a solution goes through that gives agency customers confidence that this solution is run as well, if not better, than if we were running it ourselves. And that's why it's so important for all of us. And when we're looking for solutions that we're going to be used, that are going to be managed by somebody else, we mandate that. Hey, is it Fedramp? Is this something I can trust? That's a good thing. Because that means that we have the amount of trust, if not more, than if we were running it internally. And the good news is that AWS has our platforms all FedRAMP approved, and other security and compliance accreditations. Our greatest partners have their solutions approved on and authorized on top of AWS, such as Adobe, with multiple solutions that they have too. So good. That means that now we have a platform we can rely on, keep the trust of our customers. Oh, and it's going to run as well as if we were running it ourselves inside of the government, which is good, what we all want. The one thing I want to just close on this, because the point came up a couple times today already, is how does this, one of the challenges we all have is employee retention or attracting new talent. Because 10 years ago, I would say, when I first really, I think 12 years ago now, I got into federal government work and government work. No one really looked at the government as the cutting edge of innovation. It's always been a very risk-averse type of environment. You weren't really given kudos for taking a big risk if you failed. So people didn't. And one of the things I can say about cloud is since we're so agile and since the costs have been brought down, you're only paying for what you need, the cost of risk is significantly lower. So I can be much more agile. I can be much more innovative. And when we're seeing initiatives out of federal government, the 10X initiative out of GSA and others too, We're seeing now over the last couple of years, federal agencies, government agencies take more risk, do more innovative things, and the cloud is a key enabler behind that. I truly believe that, and that's what I want to see as a citizen. So when it comes to attracting talent, we can now see and we can demonstrate to the future workers that, hey, you know what, our agencies are really aggressive. We're taking advantage of technology, we're leveraging the cloud. And from a specific digital experience standpoint, we talk a lot about analytics today. Well, analytics, how many people say, you get all this data on your website? Great, fantastic data. What's it mean? Oh, I don't know. We just got the data, got lots of clicks. Well, things like machine learning and other tools that we can actually take that data and do active things with it are really important, enabled by the cloud. New digital experiences that we all need to be thinking about. How many people here have an Alexa or a Google Home device in their world somewhere? I have 7. Okay, my house is fully listened to. But that's a new experience. How many people are thinking about how you're going to build voice into your digital experience of the future? Okay? Voice is enabled, and voice technology, something is enabled by the cloud. If you want to start attracting new talent, tell them you're working on voice. And tell them that that's a big opportunity for your agency. You'll get that. So what I want to just depart with everybody is, one, thank you again for having me here. But as you think about where you're going, as you think about influencing those who help make the platform decisions, embrace the cloud. Leverage what it does. Learn about it, what it can do for you, and learn about how it can help you innovate for your agencies. Okay. Thank you.
Howdy ho, how's everyone doing? Last session of the day, and I'm going to make it informative. I think this is a hugely important topic. We write about it at Nextgov. It's been sort of a staple on our events for the last 4 or 5 years, and there's been some change. But I always love to bring in folks in the private sector who are doing good work, and that's where Ryan comes in. He leads the Omni-Channel Experience at Navy Federal. Navy Federal is near and dear to me, not because I'm a customer, but because they've been letting me play basketball with them for 6 years. Since I moved down here, I met a friend, worked at Navy Federal. So twice a week for 6 years, I've been playing basketball for free. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yep, with you guys. And actually, group chatted about you earlier and found out Ryan's kind of a big deal. So let's see what he has to say. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Fairley. I've been at Navy Federal only about 2.5 years, but it's been an exciting journey so far. I started 2.5 years ago as the manager of our mobile team at a time when mobile was king. We have about 5 million active mobile users out of our 8 million members. When I came on, we went through a big redesign process of the mobile app. Had a lot of lessons learned that kind of led me to where I am today. We learned mobile is king. It is the #1 channel for our members. But we have a lot of things we've learned from our journey with mobile that we now want to start to apply to our other channels. Because ultimately, the member is king. And we want to really make sure the member experience, no matter where you choose to intersect with us, is as good in all of our other channels as we believe we've gotten it to be in the mobile channel. So I took on this role maybe about right at the beginning of the year.
So there was an important, one of the more important things you guys did was a couple of years ago went through a major redesign. I want you to talk about that because a lot of planning went into it. There were a lot of user tests, rounds and rounds of testing. And I think it might be important for our audience to hear the difference in what stakeholders thought customers wanted versus what you found customers actually wanted.
Sure. So that process started really right when I arrived at Navy Federal. We had done an inventory of our mobile app. We had about 178 features or things members could do in the app. We had just gone through an evaluation with a third-party research company that told us it was time for a redesign. They said we had a discoverability and ease of use problem. Our executive vice president of digital and marketing was bought in. She wanted to do the redesign. But before we kicked that off, we did a very simple member test to say, is there a discoverability problem? We wanted to really start the process using member-focused data as the source of truth. So we took the bottom quartile of that 178 features that aren't really touched thousands of times a day by our members or by our users as some of our other features are. and we found that members, when we did this test, we did like basically a can you find this feature test. So we put the mobile app in front of 30 or so users, and not a huge sample size, but the results did show that most users could not find this feature. So it kicked off the project. We said, yes, we have a discoverability. That's going to be the primary objective that we're going to seek to try to fix. We ultimately did, over 9 to 12 months, about 17 user tests in order to continuously iterate and figure out the right information hierarchy for the mobile app navigation. We did a lot of competitive benchmarking, and we really focused in on what do the members want. The results were positive. For that bottom quartile, we saw an average of about 100% uptick in utilization for those features post-redesign, with several features seeing as much as a 400% uptick in utilization. So there was a belief going in that well, these just aren't these aren't features that our members want. Maybe we should sunset them. It turned out the members did want them, and we did have a discoverability challenge.
What's the average for how just a random question, but how often do people log in, use the app?
Oh, yeah. So our numbers are pretty staggering. So we have about 5 million digital users, averaging about 90 million mobile sessions per month. So that equates to about 27 logins per month per user. And many times they're just looking at their money. Do I have enough money today to do what it is I need to do?
I should definitely do that more often, but I don't. So there are some principles that you have, and I think this might be something worth for some folks jotting down. Some experience principles you guys have sort of developed over the years that guide initiatives from now on. I want you to talk about those. Give some examples if you can, and we'll kind of go through it, so if folks are inclined, they can sort of learn from you guys' past efforts here.
Sure. It was great listening to the experience principles discussed on this morning's panel, so definitely learned a little bit from that team. So our experience principles really are an anchor point for what we do, and actually they were articulated by our CEO, who was our former Executive Vice President of Digital and Marketing. And there's 6 of them, and they're fairly straightforward, but I think they speak to our culture and our member focus. So there's show me you know me. So data's king. We have a lot of data on the member. They expect that we kind of understand why they came here today, and we know what they need. Keep it simple. I mean, that I think is something we all strive for in user experience. Do it for me. This has become a bit more of an aspirational experience principle with AI and automation. There's more and more things we should be able to do for you in banking. Tell me what's next. Don't make me guess. Don't make me come back. Don't make me have a second contact. That first contact resolution is important, and telling you what's next is part of that. Help me feel secure and in control. In banking, as in government, that's critical. We've seen headlines very recently of things that I think compromises people's sense of feeling in control. And then finally, we want technology that's as friendly as our people. For 85 years, we've been a member service organization, but now 20% of our users or our members only interact with us digitally. So how do they create that same connection to our brand if they only get to touch our technology? Anybody who's worked with our member service reps walk away delighted, and they walk away feeling that much stronger of a connection to us. So it's a real challenge that we've put on ourselves to think about how to make the technology as friendly as our people.
Yeah, when he says that they come away satisfied, it's true, because in almost every study I see, you guys are the top-rated credit union in the country when it comes to providing a positive customer experience, and we're right in line with some of the large banking institutions, if not higher. So, not to plug you, but I think it's...
We'll take it.
Yeah, it's good. If you had to pick one of those, what's the most important? Is there one that's the most important?
No, it's balance. We kind of preach balanced scorecard as now that I'm doing omni-channel strategy, and our strategy focus, it's about figuring out the metrics that matter for each of the journeys that we're tackling as we go through these redesign efforts. And a balanced scorecard is critical. Those customer experience measures are critical, as are the business efficiency measures, as are the product penetration measures. We can't steal from Peter to pay Paul, so we tend to think about all 6 of those. Sometimes I can't do it for you, so there are ones that I can't necessarily achieve, but that doesn't mean I didn't think about it. That doesn't mean it wasn't on the radar as we went through the design process.
So there were some questions earlier I was listening in about change management, and one of the gals over there asked a really good, detailed question, and I wondered how you guys address that issue too, because I know that's changed over the years. How do you handle this stuff?
I mean, what I think about with change management is culture change. We don't need a culture change at Navy Federal around member focus. Interestingly, when I got there, the phrase, well, it's a good member experience, was kind of a loaded gun people would use to get their way. They didn't necessarily have data. They just would say, well, this is what's good for the member, and somehow that would shut down the conversation. Now the culture shift is around, well, show me the data. Let's measure how good it is for the member and how much better we can make it for the member. And that's a journey we've been on. Before I got there, it's a process to go through that culture change. We've had to really bring people into the fold. So a good example of this, when we stood up a digital lab about 1.5 years ago, right after the redesign, and the first Omni-Channel Experience we did was our membership application. So we brought in all 7 layers. Yes, we're very hierarchical. We mirror the military very much. All 7 layers of leadership from the membership team, from executive vice president all the way down to the frontline supervisors, and we put them through the journey mapping process with us. We had them really sit and see the member interviews and see the data collection process. When we would share new designs with them, we wouldn't share the design first. We would share the data that informed the design. Well, here's the output from the member study, and here's the new design as a result of that study. It always started with the data. So that culture shift is just something we have to live and breathe, and we have to kind of do it top down. So anytime somebody engages with our lab, we're trying to bring those people into the fold and let them experience kind of the magic of how we work, because the methodology is great. And that really drives that culture shift.
I imagine they learned some lessons too, going through the process the same way that the average customer would. On to, I think, technology. And what are some of the technologies that you guys are experimenting with and or looking to implement? And I feel like you're in a spot where you don't have an unlimited budget for these things either. So it might mirror a little bit of what our federal folks deal with budgetarily. So. Talk a little bit about that, some of these technologies that you want to get, but how do you do it?
Yeah, just to put the budget in light, our CIO was quoted saying once that the top 10 credit unions could never have combined the same innovation and investment budget that one of the top 10 financial institutions alone could have. So that's how big, that's how small we are relative to the big guys. So yeah, we do have those challenges despite our tremendous success. As far as technologies, I heard some discussion around omni-channel platforms. That's something we're really focusing in on. We're trying to find the right platform to really unify those experiences. We've brought in Microsoft Dynamics as a potential CRM. We've been looking at Backbase as a potential user experience or digital platform for really connecting the mobile, online, desktop, and contact center experiences. But we're really looking beyond that as well. I had a great lunch with our Vice President of Research yesterday, and she's looking at new analytics tools around emotion detection and text mining. So imagine if you could listen to 10,000 phone calls, convert those calls from speech to text, separate the customer from the CSR, and not only kind of mine that unstructured data to see what the trends and themes are across the different types of contacts people have, but also what their emotion level is across those. So when we think about differentiation, it's our brand and our member engagement that differentiates us. That's a harder and harder thing to measure, and it's really neat to think about the power of something like emotion recognition and that unstructured text mining to be able to start to see, where the opportunities are to drive customer engagement and understand where we're seeing members disengage.
You've used the term fast follower too, so you're not taking chances without seen case studies and stuff, right?
Correct. Yeah, we just don't have the budget to leapfrog anybody. The fintech space has exploded. Silicon Valley is jumping in and putting tons of money into the banking industry. And so we'll either leverage what those investments are reaping, and we'll see what partners we can yield from that, where we don't have to create the innovative experience, but we can think about how to make it. So it's not about innovative technology, it's about innovative customer service for us, and how can we innovate our customer service based on the new technologies that are coming out there that others are innovating on.
One thing too, when we talked earlier, when we were sitting down over there, was a focus on sort of outcomes and not just widgets and products. So talk a little bit about that, and then I want to segue that into sort of a talent hiring issue. I heard it was addressed earlier in some of their panels too, and how you handle that.
Sure. So the output to outcome focus is still an ongoing journey. Our legacy organizational structure is that of individual profit centers. So each business unit is a profit center, and they want their widget. They want the widget, the solution that they think is going to solve their problem and move their needle. And they'll come to us with an idea that's usually a solution. And a lot of times we're being asked in digital to implement that without real clarity on what problem we're solving. So we always try to have that conversation first. And interestingly, my first and second performance evaluation wasn't what member-facing outcomes did I produce. It's how many widgets did I produce. We put out 42 releases with 42 new enhancements, and the next year I put out 73 as the mole manager, and I got a big pat on the back for that, and I felt good about it. We did good work. we had member data informing those 73 experiences, but more and more with this shift to more of a lean, agile, design thinking approach, we always start with the problem statement. What's the objective? What are the key results? How do we know that we have a very well-articulated, measurable thing that can tell us if we were successful at the end of the project? So now all of our journey teams start with that. That doesn't mean all of the project requests start with that. There's still that culture shift that's ongoing. But on a project-by-project basis, as we work with new sponsors, we're having those conversations and shifting that approach.
Your third performance review for this panel is exceptional.
Thank you.
You have a 5-star rating, sir. On the talent hiring issue, I'm curious. That's something that we see in government as a very huge challenge. It's not easy to get people on board. There was a question asked about bringing in people that are cloud natives to legacy technology environments and what the incentive is for them to actually do that for any kind of lengthy period of time. How do you guys address that issue? Have you repurposed existing employees? Have you hired new folks with backgrounds in design and user experience, or what?
All the above. We're about 18,000 employees strong right now. We have a lot of folks that are getting reskilled. So we've had user experience designers that are now user experience strategists. So it was exciting to hear somebody in that role on this morning's panel. That's a new role that we've really targeted as helping reshape what we're doing. And we see folks internally that can very easily be upskilled to take that type of role on. When we have new spaces like that, though, we do want to get one or two experts from outside who've done this before elsewhere. Otherwise, as we're building that practice, we're kind of stabbing in the dark, figuring out the best way to do this, where if we bring somebody in from the outside who's done it before elsewhere, they can help mold and mentor the other people on that team that are taking on that role. As far as hiring, I mean, the talent war is on. It's hard out there. I think all of us are experiencing that. We hire for culture more than anything, for fit. Our culture really matters to us, and somebody who kind of understands that the members are our mission and that wants to work in an environment like that is somebody who's going to be successful, and we can hopefully upskill that person to take on whatever role that we're willing to give them. You're also seeing a lot more rotations, where folks will rotate across departments, across teams, in order to get cross-skilled, in order to get exposed to what other teams are doing. And that's had a lot of success in kind of molding our talent pipeline. So that's been an important part of our talent development strategy. But when you have 18,000 employees, and you're getting more efficient because of the success we're having with digital, that's a nice problem. And you now have people that you want to somewhat reskill and repurpose. If they were doing a back office function that's no longer critical because we've digitized it, you now have a resource that can take on something new.
We got a few more questions if we need to, but I'd like to open it up for the audience if you guys have questions to hit Ryan with. I'm gonna get this gentleman right here. Wait 2 seconds for a mic.
Hi, can you speak a little bit about strategies you've used to fulfill your customers' emotional need for control?
That's a good question. I don't know if this is the best example, but the one that comes to mind is we rolled out two-factor authentication this past year, and we gave the member full control in that. We want to really lock down fraud and prevent our members' accounts from getting taken over, and two-factor authentication is one of the best ways to do it. But we chose not to make it mandatory. We did a lot of research to try to understand our members' understanding of this process. We found about 20% of members didn't understand it. They couldn't do it. Something is, depending on your point of view, something that seems as simple as getting a text message with a code and keying that code into the interface. For some folks, navigating from one tab in the browser to another to go retrieve the code from email is really hard. Things where we want to take control and say we know what's best for the user, this is going to prevent thousands of members from having their accounts taken over. We've chosen not to do that, and we've chosen more education and outreach. I've spent countless hours in branches doing digital seminars, teaching people about these things. So lots of outreach, lots of videos, emails, things that are really geared towards showing people how to do this. And we've optimized the heck out of this experience. It's as simple and streamlined as I can imagine making it, although I'm sure there's always room for improvement. But some things still are hard for users to overcome, and if you take the control away where they can't do it the way they want to do it, we've seen the results of that. They call, they get angry, they get frustrated, and because they are a member, we have to remember they have an ownership stake, so we can't just tell them what's best for them. They have to have a say in that as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's probably one of the better examples I can think of where member control was really central to something we were trying to do.
Can you give me advice on how to deal with significant others' need for emotional control, too? No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. Other questions? That wasn't a serious question. I don't have a significant other.
I've heard a lot in your responses today about measuring member satisfaction, member behavior. I'm making an assumption, and so I'm asking to clarify it. How do you measure it? I'm concerned, as a member,
thank you.
that you're primarily focused on quantitative measurement. I have seen instances where I think qualitative forums particularly with some of us who work in the field, could be very valuable to improving the customer experience, and I wondered if you had ever looked into having those sorts of things. I wanted to find you later and say, could you put something on your site where we can send you info? Because other members have also said the same.
Yeah, we just embedded UserZoom's SDK into our mobile app, and we've kind of rethought how we're gathering member feedback in the app. So it's in there. It's in the More menu under Tell Us What You Think. So we do gather that data. We look at that often. With qualitative data, we really have a series of things we do. We have a team that is text mining our social media, looking for trends, looking for specific word clouds that come out so we can dig deeper and understand qualitatively what are people saying, what's the kind of sentiment. We do different longitudinal customer satisfaction surveys that try to measure member satisfaction across different indices. And then really on a journey-by-journey basis, when I said we did 17 member tests on the mobile redesign, for example, and almost anything we design these days will have multiple tests associated with it. Most of them are usually like in-depth interview style, face-to-face research with members where we're really digging deep into the member experience directly face-to-face with the user. So I'm a big believer, coming from a very bottom line efficiency-driven organization where I started my career in the insurance industry, also a local company, you can maybe guess. They were so bottom line focused, you do start to lose that member sentiment. So as we bring more and more data into the process, this is why I had lunch with our VP of research yesterday. I'm really nervous that I'm gonna have the pendulum swing too far away from customer satisfaction, true member sentiment, and how do we evolve the way we measure that? And I was real excited to hear that Marsha already has some things in the work to look at, you know, the emotion recognition, really augmenting our text mining capability to really see and hear what members are saying in new ways and on a larger scale. So yeah, it's very important for us.
Really good questions. Is there time for maybe one more, if there happens to be one? If not, I have a question. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. You mentioned something about hiring for culture. Mm-hmm. What happens if the new hire does not match your culture? Do you mentor and mold and mentor this person so that eventually they can provide user experience or customer experience?
Yeah, whenever you have somebody that's not the perfect fit out of the gate, yeah, you have to invest a lot of time to try to bring them on board, bring them in the fold, help them see the world the way we see the world. You know, is it a skill issue? Is it a will issue? You know, it's if somebody doesn't want to kind of move further in our direction as far as how we want to work, you know, you start to have some other conversations, but you always have to recognize that you have the baggage of how we did it elsewhere whenever you enter a new organization. I can't tell you how many times I referenced other places I worked during my first 6 months at Navy Federal as though that was the best way to do it, right? And it took me time to shed that baggage and to assimilate. So I think you have to have empathy for any new person you bring in, that they're going through that process themselves, and help kind of usher them through that.
It kind of gets to one point in closing out here. You guys, everything you do goes back to your brand, right? And brand is really key for everything that you do. And I feel like the federal government has sort of untapped potential in maximizing what they do with their branding. I mean, these agencies are ones that we are all familiar with, one way or another. Can you talk a little bit about that in closing, on how important the brand is, how important the people you hire in to come in and be part of that effort are?
Yeah, I'd maybe point this in a slightly different direction, that the most important thing is the member for us, or in the digital context, the user. The brand is a great way to measure our success in establishing that connection. And it's a great kind of umbrella to unifying the experience. So they're very highly interconnected. I think there's a lot of parallels between Navy Federal as a service organization to our members and, you know, what you all do in the government sector. My dad worked for 40 years for the FAA. I'm very familiar with you know, his personal journey, and he enjoyed serving people as a member of the government, just as our employees enjoy serving our members. And I think that's kind of that unifying piece, that, you know, we chose these jobs, we chose these employers because we get to provide value to somebody else. When we have these platforms to do that, I think, we're in a different position brand-wise than the government is, for sure. So I don't know that I can provide any interesting insight on that particular area, but I can say that, you know, focusing on that service to the user is something we can all get behind, and we can all build culture behind. And I know you can't shift culture at a macro level very easily. I heard a couple references to that in some of the earlier panels, but you can influence culture on your agile teams. You can instill that culture of service, that culture of user first within those small groups, and it can be very contagious. And I am confident that the folks who chose to work for the government have that desire. They have that same desire that my team has to serve their members. So it hasn't been hard at that micro level to embed that into the culture.
If you're free tomorrow at 5, basketball, on you guys.
I'll be laying bricks. You don't want me on your side of the ball. Pick me last if I do come.
Either way, thank you so much for doing this, and I think Anna has some final remarks, but
it's been my pleasure. Thank you, everybody.